Okay, welcome back, part 5. This is going to be a bit of a adventure in sketching. It was a lot of fun to kind of figure this next stage of our project out. I'm excited to share it. If you are watching live, please, reach out in the chat, and I'll stop and see if I can back up. I think I boiled it down to a few more simple steps, but there's still going to be kind of a lot of intricate sketching. I think it'll show some good kind of cool things to try out and making sketches that are organized and hopefully give you more predictable results when it's time to make your features from those sketches. So without further ado, let's jump in. Hello again. So today we're going to work on our drains, both this upper drain to keep the bathtub from overflowing, and then there's also a drain that we can't see in our reference image, just if we want to check that out again. Yeah, so from our reference image, we're not getting any real picture of our drain in any of the angles. It's obscured. That's okay. So let's think about how we want to draw this. We will reference where this drain lands when we, after we first kind of draw our feature, we might need to adjust up and down. We do want to think about this drawing might be a wee bit unrealistic for where the plumbing, the water source for our taps, and then the mixer for the faucet, there's going to need to be some space underneath of here. So let's aim for this height, but we'll see once we have the pipes and everything in the back there, that in this cavity, that we might need to lower this for some realism. We could have some like flexible tubing and stuff up here that can work around that, but for today, we're going to just stick with what the drawing shows for aesthetics, and we can think a little bit more about function. But we are going to be laying out where the actual drain will be from our side view. Let's hide our canvases. Okay, inside of here, there's going to be this drain that's going to connect to this drain. Sounds good. So we started making things into components last week, or it's not last week, Monday. There is a bit of a hazard to this, because if we don't add those constraints or those joints like we had with our tap handle, see how these objects are connected if I click and drag them? But all these other things are sort of free to just float around if we click and drag them. So we're just going to be careful about where we're clicking and dragging. You could start to constrain these with this kind of just simple constraint, ground. I could select all of these and ground them. Go ahead and do that for these two. So now when we click and drag, I'm clicking, I'm dragging, nothing's happening. Let's open our... One day I'll remember to do that. Test. Okay, cool. Can't see when I click, you'll just have to listen. But you can at least see when I do keystrokes there. So we've got all of these base components grounded, because when we're clicking around here, we don't want these things to become disconnected. Now, because Fusion is history, you're recording history in this mode, if you were to click and drag something, there's this over here that says capture position or revert. So it's really not remembering that. Say you do a bunch of work and all these things are kind of all over the place. You can hit revert, and it doesn't add a history thing because it's recorded that there was no movement. So this is sort of like it's not in any sense of time. So it's not the end of the world, but it might be kind of annoying as we're working. So we could ground these. I'm going to make these into a group. Can't spell today. Wow, really? Okay. I caught some typos today too, but that's all right. Okay, so now no clicking and dragging. When we're thinking about the side of this object here, if we're looking at it with our X-ray vision, we're really looking at a solid mass. We know the cavity's in there, but we're looking at a solid mass of like tub, and that's not really how these things are made. They would be so heavy, they would break through your floor, and they'd be impossible to move, and also just kind of impossible to manufacture. So these are cast iron that are enameled. So this is actually going to be like a thin wall going all the way around here. So we're going to use a similar command to what we did with our faucet. We're going to open up the bottom of this. Now, this wireframe view right now is kind of difficult to work with. So let's look at the underside of our tub. I'm going to go up to our shell command and click on the face we want to open. This underside is going to be open. And let's go with a 5/8 wall thickness here. Okay, it might take some time to calculate that depending on your computer. We've got a lot of geometry that it has to offset in order to do this. So it's really kind of a beautiful result that it's giving us. It took that fillet and it's offsetting that. It takes straight walls, it's offsetting that. What we don't get is that fillet on the outside, these external fillets, they're collapsing to a point where they get sharp, if that makes sense. So if we go 5/8 to a certain point inward, it's collapsing. If you make this smaller, let's see if that fixes it. So yeah, see how we're getting that fillet when we're inside of that radius? When we go outside of it, we're going to lose that smoothed edge, that eased edge on the inside. We can add that later. We can see with the bottom of our tub, calculate, it has included that. It has offset it. So I'm going to accept that, the 5/8. Now I noticed earlier there's this kind of funny ghost that's happening from our faucet and tap handles. I think that's under Effects, Object Shadow. Excuse me, Object Shadow, there we go. For some reason that's like sending that through. It's a little spooky. We will ignore it. So let's look at this in our wireframe mode again. And now we can see it's subtle because we have all these fillets and stuff. It's a little subtle to see, but maybe we can go back in time here, see it without the shell and with the shell. So now we have a wall thickness all the way around. And I think looking underneath in the solid mode or the shaded mode, that makes a lot of sense. Great. We want to think about that cavity now because we need to fit pipes inside of here, pipes and all the plumbing bits. What I'm already seeing is that if we want our drain to end up somewhere here, we don't have a lot of head space down at the bottom, or foot space, the opposite of head space. So I think, and also looking at this, this is a really extreme angle. If you were to like try to take a shower, well, this is a bathtub, but if you were to stand up in this, you might slide down, and that could be kind of dangerous. So let's ease that angle. It's going to both help that out, actually the function of this, but it's also going to give us more space in this cavity below. So let's go back to find, I'm so glad we labeled these things. I'm going to come back in our history ribbon here and find the sketch that made this angled plane. So let's right click, edit that sketch. And here's our 3 degrees, exactly what we were looking for. Let's change that to 1. It's going to be gentle. Still going to send the water down to the drain, but maybe not as aggressively. We could also rename these, just be nice if that changed with it. But we want to just tell the right story for the next person. Cool. Okay, that should give us some more room to actually fit a pipe from here, snake around to there. Both of these pipes will connect in this vertical here. We're going to add that vent later. So the first thing we're going to do is kind of connect these in almost a chain. Like a loop between the water cavity and the 2 pipes. They're not going to have an exit yet. We'll add that eventually. All right, let's start sketching. We want to sketch in the midplane because we want this aligned with the center line of that tub. So we're going to grab, not canvases, construction. We're going to get our midplane ready. We're going to start a new sketch, create sketch. I'm going to leave it in this wireframe mode because we're going to go right back to that side view. And I'm going to take our midplane. Okay, now we are in our sketch. Let's just draw kind of roughly what we want things to look like. I'm just going to start with 3 lines. Just think about where our pipes are going to go. I'm going to click somewhere out here because we want that vertical or that upper vent drain. Click, click, click. I'm letting those constraints that Fusion's automatically producing because 90 degrees sounds good to me. Keep it simple. You can see that constraint, this perpendicular icon's showing up. Let's go back a few. Let's just do that again, just so we can practice when Fusion adds constraints or when we want to do it ourselves. So if we see that snap, automatically adding that constraint, we can see that symbol, that kind of line with 3 little tick marks and that other parallel line. That's going to be our horizontal vertical. We can take that, and perpendicular to horizontal vertical is going to be good, so we can see that perpendicular icon there. And another perpendicular. And one more. I said 3 lines, I'm at 4. And you can either hit enter or you can click that check mark, or excuse me, escape or the checkbox. Splines is enter, not escape. Lines are escape, not enter. It'd be cool if they made that uniform, just saying. Okay, let's think about our pipe diameter. I've actually checked out my tub for reference. This is the cap that acts as the vertical or the upper drain. So the pipe inside of there I measured was 2.5 inches in diameter. So let's take a center diameter circle. We're just going to be using these as measuring tools. I'm going to click the center, drag it out, and hit D on the keyboard or go to create sketch dimension. Drag this out, we'll call it 2.5. Or it's 2 inches. And then what I'm going to do is I'm using that because we're going to have a series of these at all of our intersections. Okay, now we could dimension each of these out, hit escape, and we could say 2.5 or 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. We could keep doing that over and over again. Or we could check out another constraint up here, go to constraints equal, click on the first circle, click on the one you want to match it. Whichever circle is more constrained or defined, it's going to use that one, whether it's with a dimension or other relationships. So we'll continue connecting these. I'm going to start with the one that has a dimension, click another one. Now we could take one that's referencing another reference, but it's like a reference to a reference to a reference. I think that's maybe risky form. So we're going to always go back to the source. And we see this one's got a lot of them. So that just kind of also helps tell the story that this is the one that's driving the rest of these. So if we change it, they all change. Cool. So like I said, we're using this as a guide to make sure that we're not extending past our boundaries. And it's just going to kind of help me visualize. Obviously, the pipe is not going this direction, but it will go to the top and bottom diameter here, top and bottom, also left and right. We're just using it as a guide. We want to make sure it's not going past the floor because the bottom of the tub represents the floor. So we want to give it just a little bit there. And we can further define these things as we go along. Remember, this line here is not actually the floor of the tub. This is just an ISO line that's showing from our loft. Let's keep this just outside. Let's keep this outside. We can play with the actual dimensions later, but it'll just give us an easy time for now. What I'm trying to avoid is something where we end up kind of obscuring most of this circle, the diameter of the circle, in fact, outside. So maybe we can drop down. It doesn't matter too much. And then this height, this is that thing that's going to be a little flexible as we move along. What I do want to try to define is this distance. Might change a little bit if we change that. So this might be a little fluid or flexible. And I do want to constrain this so that this somehow doesn't drop beneath. So we can do this a couple ways. We could dimension from the center line to the bottom of our tub. Okay, if the bottom of the tub isn't showing up as a reference, we need to project it. So I can hit P on the keyboard, click on that line. It's glowing now, and I click OK. And now we should be able to hit D on the keyboard, dimension, click one line, click our reference, and we can type in a number here. But maybe the story I really want to tell isn't so much about the center of the circle, it's probably the edge of the circle down. Because if we change that diameter, we want to make sure that references the outside of the circle, not the center. We want to make sure there's always distance between the two. So I'm going to click on the bottom one this time. And if I click on the circle, notice it's going to revert to the center. That's kind of frustrating. Let's hit D again. I'm going to hit escape first, hit D. And then I'm going to right click. And I open up this huge kind of all these different details and menus. I'm going to find, instead of pick the circle arc center, I'm going to pick circle arc tangent. Let's see what that gives us this time. If I get close to the circle, now we see a little X form as we touch it. Click away. There we go. Let's just give it, just going to graze the floor, give this plumber very little clearance to do any work. But I think we need to kind of be very tight with the distance here. Okay, and we probably want to end up constraining this length too. So where does 9 take us? We want to make sure we're kind of inside of this slope, not intersecting it too much back there, because we don't want to end up with a lot of sharp edges. Let's call it 9.25. Okay, I like that all right. And then I think we'll play with this after we do our next feature. So here's our layout sketch. And what I'm going to do now is make these construction geometry, even though we'll see in a second, holding down Shift to select multiple. You could also hold down Control to select multiple. And I'm going to make them construction geometry. Okay, we'll see in a second that these kind of are impossible to become our feature geometry, but it's just communicating what we're trying to do. You can see they're this kind of orange-yellow color because they're unconstrained, not because of dimension, but position. That's okay. So what we've really done with these circles is we've defined the lengths and positions relative to the tub. We could keep defining this further as we go along. But let's go ahead and start that feature. So let's change our view, visual style, to shade with visible edges. And we're going to go down to create, pipe. Cool. So now we want to come find our sketch. If you're having trouble finding your sketch, you might need to hide that tub body. You can go ahead and do that just so we can really see what we're getting. And here we go, instant pipe. If you didn't have these sizes by default, go ahead and make this 2. It's the same dimension as the circles we were drawing. And you can see from the sketch, they meet the top and bottom. That's pretty great. And in the section thickness, if you don't have this available, check that box that says hollow, because we can have a solid pipe. It's not really much of a pipe as far as delivering or pulling material, but if we check that, we get this option to hollow it out. And you can click and drag one of those handles to change the wall thickness, section thickness it's calling it, call it wall thickness in Pipeland. Let's just call it 125.125 or 1/8 of an inch, same thing. Maybe it's a little bit thicker with PVC pipe, maybe it's 3/16 of an inch. You could learn what the decimal is. It'll tell you up here once it solves that problem, 0.1875, but Fusion also will take fractions, which is why I love it. Notice in our section we can also make square pipes, or my favorite, a triangular pipe. Good luck finding that at Home Depot. Square, similar problem, but we're going to stick with the circular pipe. We're going to hit OK. So what we've got is this really actually kind of extravagantly mitered pipe. You know, if this is PVC, there's probably no way that's going to hold together. It could be like welded, you know, metal tubing, but that's not how it goes usually. What I could have us do is draw fittings around here. But let's not worry about it too much, but let's try to make those sharp edges a little more realistic. Say we could maybe bend the pipe rather than miter it and weld it. We could draw fittings. That would be that'd be a whole lesson on its own. But let's adjust our sketch a little bit. And we're going to keep using some reference geometry to make this kind of do what we need it to do dependably. So we're going to make some arcs. We're going to fillet the transition from this line to this line, this line to this line, and this line to this line. That'll give us smooth curves as we work around the turns of our pipe. So we could go to modify fillet, and if we click on one line and the other line, click on one line and the other line, click on one line and the other line. But I'm not a big fan of this. If we hit OK, we can see our circle is no longer constrained to that position that it was, that intersection of these two lines. Okay, we kind of lost some information by doing that. So let's undo, Control-Z a few times, or you can Control-Z is probably actually best in this case. You can always hit back up here, undo edit sketch. And let's do that manually this time. So let's go to create arc. I'm going to do a 3-point arc, and then we'll make some adjustments. I'm going to click once, and just click somewhere. Click once, click somewhere. We want to make sure they're concave, not convex. I don't want to add any of these automatic constraints either, so make sure you're not snapping anywhere. So we want to add those ourselves. You should end up with 3 arcs. Beautiful. Now this transition from here to here is still going to be sharp and wonky. So what we need to do, it's a technical term, click our tangent constraint, click on the line and the arc, click on the line and the arc, click on the line, the arc, the line, the arc, the line, the arc, the line, and arc. Okay, it might have scooted your sketch all around creation. It's okay, we'll adjust it. We'll go back to our wireframe mode. And these arcs are really kind of out of control. So we want to shrink them down, and we also want to give them some meaning, because what we're trying to do is we're trying to have an arc that this diameter can turn without that pipe command failing. Remember we had some lofts or some sweeps that were failing because the object would be self-intersecting at a certain point. Some things can't make that turn without like pinching or getting crushed. Think of it that way if it's like a physical thing. So what we need to do is think about this radius that can actually make that turn. So let's be conservative and just also make our lives easy here. I'm going to select nothing, hit escape if you think you have something selected. We're going to use that equal command again. Click on our arc, click on our circle, click on our arc, click on our circle, click on our arc, click on our circle. Now I didn't point back to the original circle because I thought it would be more meaningful to select the neighboring circle as that equal. And then let's just kind of scoot these things back a little bit, give us a little bit of space here. Good, we're still off the ground there, that worked. Maybe we can come back some here. We're still going to need to adjust this height. So let's go to finish sketch. Okay, nothing changed. So now let's try to use this line. Okay, we've got a problem. The problem is this arc and this line are not one. If we uncheck chain selection, we still have that same problem because this line starts from this center point and goes to this center point. It doesn't technically connect to this path, even if we unchain that selection. Chaining is basically when the software is kind of seeing where things connect, even if it's not one kind of generation of lines. If they connect in ways like tangency or other intersections, it will connect them. But here we don't have that, so let's hit cancel. We need to do some more changes. So what I'm going to do, with non-destructively, we're going to keep our references. I'm holding down Shift, navigating to find all of our lines, all 4 of them, and we're going to make these construction geometry. Okay, the reason we're doing that is now we're going to add a feature geometry on top of that line, and we want to differentiate this line from the one we're about to draw. And if we just drew 2 lines on top of each other like this, we could draw a shorter line somewhere on here. It's kind of difficult It's possible Fusion actually has the tools to help us find them, but it's a little muddy finding the difference between this line and this line. Let's delete those. So what we're going to do now is take a line, start at the center of this circle. We're going to go to the end of the arc now. Okay, and because that line terminates between 2 points, Fusion doesn't ask us if we want to keep going with that little checkbox. I'm going to hit L on the keyboard to start a line. Starting to introduce some hotkeys. I hope that's okay. So now we've rebuilt our pipe curve, and now we've added some fillets. So let's hit Finish Sketch. Nothing changed because we need to tell Fusion we've got some new geometry for it. So we can empty or press that X for a new path, and now there we go. Beautiful, curving, non-self-intersecting pipe. And let's hit OK. I think it's time we go to our visual style shaded with visible edges, and let's go to our right front and open up our canvases. Excuse me. Okay, now this cap is bigger than our pipe, but that's okay. Our cap will act as kind of a trim piece around this pipe. And this pipe, we want to maybe extend a little bit outside of the tub. So as it stands, I think it's okay. Just checked out my tub, and it does extend maybe a ½ inch or ¼ inch outside of the wall of the tub. But I think we're just a little bit low here. So again, we're trying to make it match the drawing. Let's go to our sketch, and let's go ahead and give this line and this line. Let's look at this from the side for clarity. That's the relationship between this line and this line. Let's give that some kind of constraint. Let's call it 10. And now that we've defined that, maybe we can define, we've already done that, it's the same. We could also define that line, of course. Let's check our wireframe and see if we're still, there we go. So we're still outside of there. You know, that can stay long, that's fine. These two can remain unconstrained, but maybe this position, this direction, is what we want to constrain. So let's take, let's see if that changes. Okay, we don't want that to change later. Let's make this center point, and then this point back here, let's actually make it the farthest corner on the tub. Let's make that 11. Escape. Okay, now this is still flexible, and this is still flexible, but we can't move the kind of frame of our plumbing path. Okay, this can move up and down, that's fine. We're going to change those anyway. And we just want to make sure they're going all the way past, or at least the diameter past. Diameter, I mean, thought this would be a quick demonstration. Okay, this diameter, we want to make sure that is not inside. We see how that bottom line's inside. We want to make sure it's outside. Okay, I'm going to delete that line. We don't need that. Unless you need it for reference, keep it, sure. And let's hit Finish Sketch. Great. So I think we raised it up a little bit. Let's check one more time, and then I think we will forgo our canvases for a little while. It's a little low. We could make that say 11's too high. Okay, because I've constrained everything, I feel comfortable editing this sketch kind of at this funny angle. Because it is kind of an intricate sketch, I want to make sure I really know what I'm clicking on. Let's say 10.5. A little high. Let's take off a ¼ inch. Beautiful. Let's accept that. So I'm going to turn off our canvases. We're done for the moment. So what I'm looking for is, yes, this drain is inside of this fillet. We wanted to make sure it wasn't intersecting that fillet. Otherwise, we could have a real kind of funny time with our drain actually going and intersecting over here could cause problems. And I like how much this is sticking out. It's kind of a hard thing to measure because we have this sweeping angle here, how much it's actually sticking out, because this top dimension is different than the bottom dimension. We could measure it. I think it looks okay. This bottom one, however, we're going to want to raise or lower down because that drain obviously doesn't stick out. We want that drain to actually be beneath the surface so we can add our drain plug. But first, what we want to do is we want to cut into our tub body so that something can actually flow through here and so we can fit the pipes through. So we used a combined tool earlier this week. We're going to use a slightly different tool, split body. So I'm going to take our body to split, just so we can introduce a new tool here. Take the tub, that's what we're going to be cutting, and we're using our splitting tools as the pipe. And hit OK. So what changed? Nothing really changed. If we open up our tub body, and then go to the bodies folder, we've got all of these new chunks. So let's isolate this. We can look at that better. So we can see, if I hide that body, we've got this piece, this piece, this piece, this piece. So it not only took out the parts we wanted to cut through for the material to flow through the pipe, but it also used the pipe as its own profile. So it kind of almost like duplicated them or made them the intersection. Now, if we did a combine command, take our tub, take our tool body, and did cut, we'd get a similar result. We'd get fewer pieces, and you would just have to do what we're about to do with those. That's one reason I went ahead and just did the split. Because what we're going to have to do now is we're going to have to clean up the extra stuff. So I'm going to select all of the pieces. If you click on them, they will glow blue. So it'll be clear which ones you want to keep, which ones you don't. And I'm going to hit, let's see what happens when we hit delete. That's weird. It says this feature is referenced by other features in the timeline. Are you sure you want to delete? Well, that's weird because if we look at our timeline, we are on the last feature. If we change something at this point in time, how can it change something in the past? Let's hit delete and see what happens. Okay, it made some kind of mess somewhere. And suddenly, if we look at our, well, where did our tub body go? That's very strange. It went back into tub demo. So it lost its component status. So point being is delete is a destructive way of working. We want to try something else. So is there an option? Yes. It's kind of its own feature that's hidden here. It's called remove. Okay, and sure enough, 1, 2, 3, 4, we've removed those pieces. And it didn't change anything else in our history. The tub body is still its own component. It also made 4 new features in the feature tree. So that's maybe a lot of kind of extra stuff. You could group those and minimize them. Let's check to see if our pipe did what we needed to do. So I'm going to hide it. And if you didn't make this a new component, go ahead and make that pipe a new component. Drain pipe, try that. Okay, so we can see, well, let's call it daylight coming through that end. And it's kind of hard to tell from here. Maybe we need to orbit down and see if, yes, get a little sliver of daylight coming through here. So that means we went all the way through the tub. That's great. We can fit our lovely pipe in there. Cool. All right, so now we've split that. We've removed and deleted the extra parts. Let's start with this bottom drain. I'm going to take an extrude command without a sketch, and I'm going to click on the surface of that pipe. I can either make this go up or down. I'm going to make it go down. Let's see how that looks. If we were to try to measure distance between here and here, it's going to give us something kind of funny. Gave us an angle. So what I did was I went to inspect, measured this surface to this surface. I was trying to get a linear dimension, but because they're not parallel planes, all it could give me was an angle, and it sure enough is our 1 degree of angle. So that at least means that this pipe is parallel to the floor or the surface of this pipe, but this is not. So trying to give an accurate dimension, similar to what we were looking at up here, the distance from this surface to this surface, depending on how meaningful you want it to be, might give you kind of diminishing returns for the trouble. What we do want to do is just make sure it's sunken down a little bit, because if we look at our drain, we want to have this part here. We're going to kind of do this roughly. This rubber part is supposed to compress against this part, which is sort of a flange on the pipe, or the end of the pipe. And let's say that we're going to put an insert in here now, and that insert, let's say, is threaded into this pipe on the inside. We're not going to worry about the threads right now. We're going to kind of do some aesthetic modeling. I know it's all the trouble with the drain, but bear with me. Okay, so let's start with a new sketch. We can make that sketch plane. Up here is not going to work too well because we want it to be normal to or parallel with this plane. So let's make sure we're looking on that drain. And we can go ahead and look at that. Look, click there. Beautiful. The shading on that pipe shows us that it's curvilinear on the inside too. That's great. Okay, let's think about what we want our... This is the part of the drain that keeps like large objects from going into your plumbing and causing trouble. So I want to think about a plug that can sit in here. And let's start on the inside. I'm going to project this. So I can go to Create, Project, Project. Click on that. We're going to click OK. Not much change. We have a purple line there if we were to hide some things. Okay, we could do that just to clear up some space. We've got this circle. And let's offset that. We're going to use a new command. I don't think we've used this yet. Modify, offset. It's actually not going to modify the original geometry. It's going to add something new in relation to that. Now, by default, you might get different positions. We want this to go to the inside. So let's make it go 1/4 inch to the inside. Now, I typed in a 1/4 inch. It went to the outside. So we need to make this negative. Great. Now what I want to do is use the center of our circle, and we're going to draw some spokes because we want to keep things from falling inside of here, as I mentioned. So let's go to Create, Rectangle, Center Point Rectangle. Let's start in the center. I'm going to go up, and I'm going to connect that second point to just somewhere on this outer circle. Not this one, but this one. And let's make this dimension the same as that dimension. It's not working. Usually lets me do that. That's a little funny. It's okay. We can just type it in. I'm just going to try to connect those. Okay, we could draw another circle, or excuse me, another rectangle going perpendicular. But let's try a new command. I'll hit Escape. Go to Create Circular Pattern. We're going to take a rectangle to a circular pattern. I'm going to make my center point first, center of the circle. And then the objects, I could take the whole rectangle, meaning not just these lines, but also the top and the bottom. But we actually don't need those. They're not going to be so useful for us. Because if we think about it, what it's actually creating is its own closed area in between there and there, which we'll have to check out later. So keep an eye on that. Okay, find a kind of angle that you like. It could be, I would keep it between this quantity 3 and 4. Okay, that probably is realistic. That could look nice. It's not really letting a lot of material pass through at this thickness. Maybe we could make this... Really not playing nice with me today. There we go. Okay. Maybe we can make this the same as that. But let me do that. There we go. Oh, it's negative. That's why. Okay. Cool. Okay, let me explain what I just did. I understand why it wasn't working the first time. So remember, this is actually a negative number, even though the dimension here is saying, let me just make that as it was before. Okay, so this is just, we've typed in a number. As we started, it was negative 0.25, but it's showing us when we dimension it, the distance between here and here actually is 0.25. So it's not telling us a lie. What the dimension actually is, though, is it's part of that offset. And here we can see this offset constraint down here. So it's communicating with this. So it's saying from this line, do you want to go in or out? It's negative or positive. So if I want this piece to reference that piece, it's probably actually better to start with this being the driving dimension as just a positive, like think of it as an absolute value. And then here, if we make that equal that, and to do that, I can just click on another dimension. See, this is D, dimension 104. If I hit enter, it will say X. Now we have a formula, X equals D104. So if I change this, it'll change that. However, we want it to go on the inside, not the outside. So there's just a little bit of algebra. Sorry. Double click on that to change it. I'm going to navigate to the far left and just lead that with a negative. So we're saying the dimension or the offset is negative dimension 104. Dimension 104 right now is positive, so if we make a positive negative, it's negative. Now it's going towards the inside. Beautiful. And now these are parametric to each other, so if we make this something else, cool. I'm going to add a little circle in the middle here. And let's make that similar. We could also make that all modular. So if we change this, everything changes. We could also have done that with the tangent command. You see how it's kind of kissing each of these lines? Okay, we've got a really kind of noisy sketch here. And that's okay. When we start our command now, our extrude command, we're going to have lots of things to click on. There could be another way to do this a little more cleanly. See, we have a lot of things to just check out. Okay, we could have gone back and made anything that was not functioning for us so well. Construction geometry, we could have made this construction geometry, and Fusion would have ignored that. So now we've got to come in here and make all of these. It's kind of like a game. It's fun. Okay, we've got 32 profiles selected. That's a lot. Let's bring our pipe back. Okay, we want to make sure before we even think about the next step, make this operation a new component. And let's make this grow down. Let's make it -1 divided by 8. But actually type that. Okay, so we're 1/8 inch down. That's fine. And then we're going to have, in a second, we'll grow the rest of the piece up. So new component, make sure we're not joining it. This piece is not integral to the pipe. It's a separate piece. So new component, it's going down. And we can see we have a new component there. I'm going to call this drain plug grate. Sort of a grate. It's a grate. I'm going to do another extrude command. And I'm going to leave this pipe visible for the beginning of it. I'm going to try to do this without making any new sketches. Let's cross our fingers. So new extrude. I'm going to click on our grate. And I'm going to click on the pipe, but no dice. So foiled. Because these are separate components, not going to let me do it. And that's okay. So let's make a new sketch. Click. And I'm going to say project, P on the keyboard, click on the outside of that pipe. Now if I hit finish sketch, we should be able to do this. Hit extrude, bam, bam. Let's hide that pipe. Okay, let's go back to our sketch. and go back to create, project include, or P on the keyboard. And this time, instead of specified entities, let's just take body, and let's click on that thing, and it will send this whole profile that we just spent all that time drawing into one closed profile. So what we have is really the wall thickness of the pipe plus our grate. And what we want to do is extend those up together. So we are going to now make this join this component, and let's make that another 0.125 up. Whoops. Hit enter too soon like me. Cool. Let's look at that with the pipe, and maybe we can look at it with our X-ray vision and just kind of see what's going on. Get it from the left side. Okay, and we can see we can click and drag this because it's not grounded. We can lift that pipe cover off that grate, and let's just pretend that there's threads connecting this piece and that piece. It's probably not a lot of material for threads, but we can continue to develop these things. This is sort of a draft or a placeholder. We can come back and fill out some of those details. Now this hole in the middle is to give us the ability to drop in a plug. We can do that later. I think I'll leave it to y'all if we don't have time. I just want to make sure we can get to the vertical part because it's got some ideas too. Let's come back to that. So we've got that piece. Let's come up here and let's create a new sketch. I'm going to start on that face, kind of like what we did with the bottom drain plug. And I'm going to bring our tub body back. So we want to think about the tub. Let's start with a center diameter circle. And I'm just kind of hovering around until you might like touch one of the edges and come back, and we're going to end up getting, it's kind of hard to see on the screen, but there's a little aqua circle there. That's going to be our center point, our concentric constraint. We can have Fusion automatically give us that. If we hit escape, we can see if we try to move that center, we can't, we can only change the diameter. Okay, next we are going to start with an offset. If you had something selected, it will immediately go to that. We don't want to offset that line. Hit escape, new offset, click on the outer diameter of the pipe, and let's call that 0.025. Great. Now, so that's giving us a little bit of gap between the pipe and the thing, the cover that we're going to press on this as a drain plug. Now mine has these little tabs that help it grab on there. We're going to make ours a little simpler. It's just going to hit the outer diameter, and it should work. Okay, now this is going to be sent backwards. We're going to extrude this. So let's go ahead and do that just to see. I'm going to make this a new component. And we can go this way, or we can go that way. We want to go that way. But we want to make sure it's not any bigger than it needs to be. We want to have it stop at the tub. Well, we've been talking about these funny angles and how that could be kind of tricky to accomplish. But check this out. If we go to extent here, change this to to object, and make that object the wall of our tub. Okay, if you get an error, if by default for some reason you're on chain faces, might give you some trickiness. Let's go ahead and hit OK. We can see now that, let's hide our pipe for now. This piece has kind of come with this miter. It's actually this kind of beautiful shape that comes with all that curvature of the tub wall. So it sort of was like our combine or our split body command, but all in one. It kind of did an extrude, but it stopped right where we needed it. Now I actually want this to have a little bit of a gap back there, just in case, you know, we need to push it on a little harder or something. It has a little bit of flexibility. Let's modify this so as we push, it gives us a little bit of extra gap there in case, you know, there's like a fit issue. So we don't want it to not be tight enough where it would just fall off all the time and you'd have this like gaping hole in your tub. So let's give this an offset. We can offset from this face all the way around that curve, this like compound curve that it's ended here. Let's make that 0.025. Okay, I'm scrolling in, zooming in, because I'm looking for a shadow line. I wanted to make sure that we weren't going beyond the tub. We wanted to just go just shy of the tub. And if we look, let's go to revert because I moved things around. See that shadow? We've got a little bit of a gap there. Cool. Okay, now we want to cap this. So what we're going to do now is extrude here. Now we don't have this inside, so I think we might have to do, yeah, it's only going to take that face. So we're going to, let's bring our sketches back. I haven't been labeling anything so bad. Yeah, okay. So we might need to bring our pipe back. Rather than drawing another circle, I'm going to use what we have, things stay connected. Now notice we've got kind of all these concentric rings. Make sure you grab them all. Okay, I'm not I'm not showing the pipe again because we want to make sure that it's not joining. But just in case we do have the pipe on, and we grow this out our 0.125, by default, you're probably going to have this operation as join because this piece is contacting this piece we just sent backwards, but also the pipe. It doesn't unfortunately tell us what it's joining. So just to be sure that we're not joining to the pipe, let's hide the pipe. So if we hide the tub too, we should just see this piece. I'm going to hide that sketch. I'll go back and label these later. We'll just keep moving. So now we've got this solid piece. If we look at the pipe and we look at it from the side, we've got this piece. We've got a little bit of a gap here. So we want it to be a friction fit. There might be some variation in the pipe thickness or the way that this cover is made. Okay, that can come in and go out. What I'm noticing is it's a little thin. I wanted to try to keep this piece as thin as possible, but we need to have some way for water to get in here, and we need a little bit more material on the outside. So let's make this 0.25. Okay, I'm just testing to see if did it accidentally switch back to joining that pipe. Weirder things have happened. That looks good. Let's go revert, just get that movement out of the way. And if we look at this piece, it's got a slit, or a slot rather, that goes all the way through the bottom so that when water comes up, it'll flow up into here and it'll go through the pipe. It's about all the way up, maybe a third of the diameter of that cap. So we want to end up cutting a slit up here. So I am going to draw, we could draw it here and send it through. I want to use that midplane. So let's hide some things, open some things, create a sketch, and click on our midplane. Close that drawer. And let's draw a 2-point rectangle. And I'm just going to kind of throw it in there right now. Let's hide that pipe. I want to figure out what the midpoint is between this wall and this wall. So if we go to project, I'm going to click on this outer piece. Oh, you know what? We can have that body instead of specified entity. If you have specified entity on, what I was going to do was take that outer edge and then this inner edge. So we've got this and that. Click on those. Let's go back to, there we go. So now we've got the potential distance between here and here. I'm going to, somewhere on the midpoint, I just drew a line. It doesn't have to be there, although it could be. And I'm going to make that construction geometry. And I'm going to drop a line from the middle of that midpoint to this midpoint. Now, if you're not seeing these constraints, let's do this. Oops, a line rather. Line. So I'm hovering over in the middle of this line. It should show me this triangle. Triangle is always midpoint. And we could come perpendicular, or we could directly go to this midpoint where it snaps. And if you hadn't already aligned things with a horizontal vertical command, you could either do that or make it perpendicular. Okay, so what did I do? A lot of trouble. I just want to make sure that whatever this slot is has equal material on the left side and the right side for when we make that cut. Let's see what kind of thickness we can get away with. I'm going to hit D on the keyboard. If we make this 0.125, that means that we have a 1/16 of an inch on either side of that. That might be a little sketchy. Maybe we make this that'll be fine, actually. We'll just say that's fine. We can do it that way. If this is too weak, we can change it up. So let's hit Finish Sketch. I've got another idea for us. Oh, and let's clean up. Let's make that a construction. Now, this is just kind of hanging out down here. We could have it just go to there, but it's probably better that it goes past, just in case things change. We could dimension it at least to make sure it's, you guys can tell I like 0.125 for a lot of things. Okay, and hit Finish Sketch. Let's go back to shaded with visible edges. It's often I like to see things shaded with visible edges when I start to do a feature because it gives me a better understanding of what's really happening. So let's go to Extrude, and we can start to drag that out and see it's cutting. We get a little picture of what's happening. And we're going to change that to symmetric. It's just going to go both directions. We can also make this distance, oh, I'm wrong. Yeah, okay, because it's coming from the inside, it's kind of just in there. We can do symmetric, and we can, well, we know that it's a total of 1 inch either side, because the overall diameter of this cap, oh, we made it a little bit bigger. Okay, I'm wrong again. We just want to make sure it goes all the way past. You probably just a visual here. We're not going to give it any relationship to an object. That's fine. It's nice when we can. Okay, so there's that. I do think this might be a little flimsy, though. In fact, check this out. I think our other mistake is that we're not going up to this point. So let's go back to our sketch. Because if we look at this, it's actually not connecting anywhere in here. I made this mistake earlier today, but here we are. So we actually want this edge to be coincident to this wall. So let's get rid of some of this stuff. We've got extra stuff here now. We don't need any of this midpoint. We don't need any of that. This is free to move around. Let's make this collinear with that line. We saw that projected line. Let's go to Constraints, Collinear, click, click. Except that was supposed to be projected and I deleted it. Goodness gracious. Okay, there's our projection constraint. We want to keep that. So collinear, click, click, great. Now we have a little bit more material on the front, and if we see, if we hit Finish Sketch, we've got that coming up to the top. We can go ahead and make that actually, that's a little funny. That might also be weird. Let's flip it around because I'm looking at my piece here and I got twisted around. So can we do that? Is that going to be a chore? Let's see. Well, we can't move this way. Let's make it wireframe so it's easier to see. Can't move it to that side. Why not? Let's get rid of some of these dimensions and constraints. And there we go. We can flip it on over. And let's also constrain this. Let's have it go to the midpoint. So I can do that. Either I could dimension out through the math, or I can click and probably drag and find that, because we're making this point the midpoint of this here. We could also take a constraint midpoint, click on that point. I'm looking for this top corner of that rectangle, and just click on that line and it'll find it. Okay, I'm feeling much better about this. Great, that's what we're looking for. Now in actuality, cutting this way might not be visually great, or I don't know, let's call it visual. Actually, it could be cut pretty easily, but let's go ahead and fillet this and just make that look a little better. We could have done that in the sketch, or we could do it in a feature. I'm hitting F on the keyboard, taking those intersections. Another way I like to do things in the sketch, I'm jumping around now, I know. Go back to wireframe. I'm going to make a circle. It's going to be a 3 tangent circle. I'm going to click on 1 line, 2 line, 3 line, every time, just like that. I'm going to do that again. So rather than a center point circle, where we'd have to then constrain this out, tangent, 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 we can grab a piece of sketch geometry that has those assumptions or those needs built in. So 3 tangent circle, 1, 2, 3. Okay, it's fully constrained in position and diameter because of that. If we hit finish sketch, nothing changes, of course. I'm going to go back to visible edges. And now we've got suddenly 4 profiles selected, even though we only had 1 in the beginning. So what we've got is a need to deselect that. Our circle's its own profile, and then this rectangle where it intersects that circle's profile. So we've got 2. And wow, I like the look of that so much better. Looks friendly. Let's go ahead and add a fillet on this top cap so it's not sharp. Go to modify, fillet, click on that edge, and we don't want it to intersect here because that could kind of make things a little strange. Let's have it just come shy. 225. Great number. Okay, let's bring our pipe back. Let's give this a name. Drain top cap. And there's our drain. Let's give these some appearances so we can start to see things separate from each other. Let's take, what plastic do we have? Sure. None of these are really PVC, but y'all just don't tell anybody, okay? And these, let's make that our stainless steel polished. We can bring our tub back. You can see that looks pretty good. Other thing, just to finish this off, these sharp corners probably aren't the most realistic thing. Let's go ahead and soften them. I'm going to give them 1/16 radius. So you could click on all of those things, but let's try something else. I'm going to go, we're not in a sketch, we're in just a feature. I'm going to go create, pattern, circular pattern. My pattern type is going to be features. I'm going to select this last fillet we made just here. That's our object. We've answered that question. And now let's select our axis. And we're going to click, we don't need a line or anything. We can just find some cylindrical face and click on that. And we've only got a couple of them there, so let's keep adding to this. Click OK. That did not work. Let's try it again. Okay, the preview looked pretty good, but what we maybe need to do let's say identical. There's these different compute options here. See, why is it not liking that? No fillet edge found. Very well. Optimize did it. That's one thing that I just always kind of have to experiment with. Sometimes when you pattern or mirror these features, you get some of these rebuild issues where it just can't find that. So Optimize seemed to work in this case. Let's go uncheck suppressed. So I was doing a pattern instead of a, selecting all, 18 edges or however many that is. 3 times 6. Yeah, sure. That was supposed to save us on clicks. Turned out to be a little bit more work, but that's okay. Looking at this now, it seems like we're just not going to get a lot of material passing through there. So let's go back to the sketch that made that. And let's make this, you guessed it, 125. Okay, I like the look of that. Everything rebuilt, no errors on the timeline. Now a good thing to do would be, I'm going to relabel or label for the first time all of these sketches and any construction geometry we made, so that we can go back and find things on our timeline. Because right now, these numbers just aren't as meaningful to me as when we give things proper names. Okay, that brings us to 3 o'clock. Let's just review what we've got. Going to bring everything back. Okay, we've got our pipe down here. Let's end it this way. Let's end it on kind of a note to just think about progress for the future here. Gonna hide the tub. And I'm just gonna draw a line somewhere from this intersection down. I don't really care how long it goes right now. Didn't change anything, of course. I'm gonna right click on roll history marker. I was changing our pipe profile. Let's call it drain pipe. It's not a profile, it's a path. So I was modifying that sketch because I wanted to actually have this drain somewhere out into the world. A few more minutes with this. And we've got our lovely, smooth, softened curve for this drain. If we try to add this, I'm holding down Control. It might be Command on a Mac. Okay, can't really select that. If we uncheck chain selection, still not going to grab it. So let's do, I've rolled my history marker back here. Let's do another pipe. And let's see if we can bring that sketch back. Good thing I labeled it. And let's see if we can add a path here. Just there. Let's see, can we join it? Okay, we have the same specs that we had on the other pipe. Okay, looks like it joined up. Okay, let's just check. We've got one body. Great, we've got one body that goes through. Let's check out in our wireframe mode to see if we've actually got a connecting connection. Now this is a really kind of exotic thing. We would use, just straight pieces of PVC and then connect them with couplers. But yeah, we've got a blockage. We look inside. Yeah, we're not going to see anything. So let's go to extrude. Let's create a new sketch first. On that face, I'm just going to hit P, project this edge. We just want to take that circle. And let's go to finish sketch. Let's just send that up through our pipe. Just visualize it where we're trying to go above that. Okay, let's just make sure that we've got connection between this cavity and this cavity. So I don't know if we've done this yet. Let's go to inspect, section analysis. And our face, you could either use one of the origin planes or we could click on the face of this pipe. Looks good. And before we hit OK, let's bring this through here and see if we get connection. So we got a little issue there. When we sent that pipe up, it intersected with that pipe. So we can see that that vertical cut we made just now worked beautifully. It's going all the way through. But when we first built that pipe, it created a blockage in there. Okay, this was kind of silly because, again, it's not really how we make pipes, at least with PVC drain pipes. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. So we can actually make a sketch see, did that do what I wanted it to do? Okay, yeah, so that inspect mode doesn't really do what we need, but maybe we can try some split body magic. This and that. What we want to do rather is split that body and use that wall, and use that wall. It's unhandled intersecting tool data. It's a new one. Okay, not going to take that. Very well. Yeah, because those are one body, maybe they're not going to work out. So let's go back to where I know this is it's a little wacky. Let's call this a new body instead of join, back where we made that pipe. So we've got this piece going up. We're not joining it yet. Let's go back to where we cut. So that's still doing the work it needs to do. We cut up through this body. Remember, I'm just looking at this in a section analysis. We haven't done any change to this piece where it has that red hatch. That's going to be up in analysis. We can unhide that. Okay, now if we go to combine, we're going to cut this piece with this piece. Let's see what we get. We have two bodies. Got that piece and that piece. Yeah, let's hide that. Sometimes I like to hide things before I delete them just to make sure. I've got this piece and then that piece. Okay, so now they're actually in the same component. They're not joined yet. But that's looking pretty good. So that piece I hid, I want to remove it. And let's turn off our analysis. And now I'm going to go to combine these two. Instead of cut, join. Something is a little weird. Okay, we had keep tools. That's why. All right, what an adventure today. So just to show you, when we did keep tools, it kept that new piece we added and the old piece that we then combined, so it kind of duplicated it. It's a case where we'll uncheck keep tools. And there we have it, a beautiful, intersecting, very luxurious piece of PVC. Cost us a fortune, but it's all in one piece, and the plumber will never get it into our tub, because that would be incredibly hard to do. Go to the end of our timeline, and we'll just end on a nice note here. That's pretty much our tub. We could add the little screw cap. I encourage you to find a way to try to make some kind of revolved form. You could have a little gasket on the bottom, but there's some screws, some threads in the bottom there, so that when you turn your drain plug, you can raise or lower it as a stopper if you want to fill the bathtub or empty it. That's what that is. And then I think what we can do on Friday is, for a little bit of fun, we can jump into, say, like the shampoo or the soap, some of these other things that are left on our tub that we haven't quite looked at, and maybe talk some more about joints. And rather than just grounding these things like we have, giving them mechanical joints to each other where it makes sense. So thanks again. Please leave any questions in the comments. Appreciate y'all hanging out. Have a good rest of your day.